Welcome back. The Biden administration is aiming for 100 million coronavirus vaccines in the president's first 100 days in office. Agencies can use the Defense Production Act to speed things up. Jeff Bialos is partner at Eversheds Sutherland. He's former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Industrial Affairs. Jeff, welcome. Thanks very much. You're writing about this issue in Defense News, and I appreciate you discussing this today. You write, the executive order about the Defense Production Act is a good first step. What comes next is even more important. What is so important about what comes next, Jeff?
Well, you have to put this in context. There's no modern day precedent for what we've done and what we need to do here to mobilize our industrial resources for PPE, for testing, and for vaccine on really a society or global basis, and to use the DPA in that context. We've done one-offs and two-offs with respect to using a defense production off, but nothing like this. The administration did a good start, as you said, with a plan, an executive order, and by the way, a supply coordinator named to identify shortages. But I think they ought to build on that and not just leave this to the agencies. I think the Trump administration tried that, and what we found is it didn't work well. I think we need a holistic approach, and by that I mean, the president said this is war. We need to create effectively a unified command center, if you will, under that supply coordinator, to bring together in one place the people with the skill sets in health industries, in Defense Production Act, in budget, in rapid equipping from the Defense Department and FEMA, who could do rapid contracting. And once they do that, they need to get under the hood of the vaccine production supplier base, which we don't know, and I don't believe each vaccine producer knows the whole picture, to make sure we have enough to supply the needs in the first 100 days and beyond. And so it's an information gap. We need to, that's the first thing to do, is to survey these companies and do an information and to get the information. Once armed with that information, we need to figure out the best way to expand the overall supply in the short term, to add capacity in the medium term, and to add to the the base of things we could draw on in the long term. I think in the short term, the realities of making vaccines and ingredients regulated products, it makes it challenging to really increase things. Yes, and I also assume that a lot of these companies are operating at full capacity today to do this. So if you issue them, for example, a rated order, which is the tool of choice under the Defense Production Act, you might put us first in the queue, but you're not going to expand the supply. I think what you have to do is, by getting this information, you look at these suppliers and look, maybe some are doing other things in their facilities. And in that case, we can issue an allocation order, rarely used, to essentially require the whole facility to be used for national security. Why would they be doing this? Well, who knows? Maybe some products in their product mix are more profitable than others. I don't know. But that's the first order of business. The second is to facilitate, to use the incentives and the financial incentives under the Defense Production Act to essentially provide loans and other mechanisms to add supply lines, add capacity, in any which way that can be done in the short and medium term. It's not an easy thing to do, and it's not a 3-month fix. But we need to do this to make sure that the president's goals here can be met. And I'm concerned, for one, if it's left to individual agencies, we're going to have a challenge in doing this.
I want to go back to the kind of the framework that you laid out at the beginning of your comments there, Jeff. What's different about the vision that you laid out there than what the Trump administration put together with Operation Warp Speed? We have General Perna at the head of that, and medical professionals at the head of that. What was underneath that was different or didn't work as well as the structure that you envision?
Well, you're talking about Warp Speed. I was talking overall about PPE and testing. We did virtually none of that, by the way. I think at Warp Speed, what's hard to see, it looks to me like they didn't issue rated orders to Pfizer or the other companies. They didn't use the DPA. And I don't think they have, to what I can see, at least from the outside, much, if any, direct visibility into that supplier base. So it's nice and great to have contracts at the top level, but we don't know if we have the supplier capacity to meet all these contractual obligations of all these companies, not just to the United States, to many other countries around the world. So that's why I think this is a challenge where government has to step in and say, look, this is a war. We need to, companies are reluctant to give you information about their supplier base. We need to get down into those weeds to figure it out. I think that's one of the big differences I can see.
We have a little bit more than a minute left, and you write at the beginning of this piece about something that I have not seen as much discussion about in other places, and that is something you alluded to a moment ago, thinking about the entire supply chain. You write it this way: from specialized ingredients in the vaccines to critical auxiliary items such as glass vials. I remember one discussion I heard, I think on Bloomberg Radio months ago, talking about the availability of vials, and just about no other conversation about the supply of syringes, the supply of all of the other materials that go along with administering a vaccine to someone. What's lacking there, and how can the DPA help address that problem too?
Same issue. It's the same issue I just articulated. We need to get the information and move on from there. With my less than a minute left, let me make one other point, which is, look, there may be some hard choices ahead here. We have several vaccines that are authorized, but one other one, which is a single-shot vaccine, which may be authorized in the next month or two. It could be the administration may face a challenge of, let's assume that vaccine is authorized, and we look at the supplier base, maybe to move things along and get that one-shot vaccine out to more people quickly, we have to redirect some of the supplier base to Johnson & Johnson. It's not an optimal choice. It's not a first choice. But, it's the kind of triage in the battlefield, so to speak, they're going to have to think about in terms of how do you do this quickly and efficiently.
Jeff, thanks very much for coming on. It's great to have you here.
Pleasure. Nice to be here today.